Let me tell you, let me give you a quick review of what we've talked about so far. A true and false review. When forgiving, we should try to forgive and forget. You can try, but it's physiologically not possible to forget. Okay? So you can't. It's not possible. But you can remember the hurt done to you. You can remember that differently. Okay? I think psychologically it's called reframing. You can reframe the wrong. But it really is just as simple as looking back and seeing it as a blessing in some way, like Joseph. You know, last week we talked about Joseph. He said, well, God, as horrible as you meant this for me, God meant it for good, to the saving of many lives. That's looking back on a bad event and realizing there's more to the event than just what happened to you in that moment of that hurt. That there's a larger story that needs to be told. And as you live the years beyond that, as you go beyond that, you see better perspective. You have a better perspective of what happened and how you grew through the experience. But no, it's not necessary to forget because it's not possible. It is good to get angry when trying to forgive. This is the one where we said, well, we could modulate it a bit. It's true. It's acceptable. It's okay. And in fact, actually, it is good because you actually touch on your feelings. You can't separate an offense, a hurt that someone does to you, from the feelings associated with that. So you get angry, you get hurt, you become fearful, maybe. In fact, usually an offense causes a certain amount of gut level fear about your own value, about where you're going in your life, about your dignity. Was I not worthy of being treated with respect? You know, those kinds of things. There's gut level emotions with that. So when you are working on forgiving, you may feel angry. It's not a bad thing. Okay? Does everybody follow me so far? That's just a river. We should try to forgive others quickly. This was last week's. False. False. Because the bad stuff takes a long time sometimes to let go of. Forgiveness is a process which is ongoing in the life of a child of God. Now, say, well, how do you know that? Because God's forgiveness of us is the same way. It's a lifetime of forgiving. Okay?
But those small things, it's very ill.
The small things, right. The small things, and that you don't hang on to them, you know, for a long. Yeah, actually, the emotion, the anger. Paul says, and we're going to look at the passage in a minute. You shouldn't go to bed with that. You know, don't let the sun go down. So, okay, all right. Let's do the one tonight. Let's do a few tonight. True or false? Over time, my hurt will go away, and my forgiveness of the person who hurt me will take care of itself. I'm willing to hear some. Partially true, okay? And you don't think so, okay? All right. Maybe what about your own personal experience with the big stuff? I'm not talking about, remember stepping on somebody's foot as you're walking down the aisle at church? That's not something that requires major forgiveness. We would think something is wrong with you if someone stepped on your foot and you look up and they say, excuse me, and say, well, I'll have to think about that. What? Like bump into somebody in the hallway and say, oh, I'm sorry. Well, don't let that happen again. Yes.
I said what I did. I don't think because the hurt will go away, yes, but the forgiveness takes time, and it won't take care of itself. You have to consciously and on purpose and forgive.
Okay, consciously and on purpose. So it doesn't happen accidentally.
No, so like it doesn't
Takes effort.
That, forgive who hurt me will take care of itself.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think it is something that comes, I have got some ancient hurts that I'm still going back and working to, forgiving
Okay.
again. Long time ago, and you would think, oh, no, you still have to, shut up, Devin.
No. What about the? Something just popped up in my mind as you were saying that. What about the things that you remember maybe 20 years later? Things that your brain never really forgets anything. Okay, so you get a few years down the road, and then you think back and you thought, you know what? They really did me dirty. That was just dirty.
Sometimes even after they're dead.
Even after, those are especially troublesome. What happens when what do you do when someone has died that you realized, oh my goodness, they mistreated me so bad? What do?
You keep walking to forgive.
Yes, Joyce.
There's something else that you can do, and you can stop and try to figure out what was going on with that person, why they did it.
Okay,
If
okay,
you understand why they did it, sometimes
Okay.
that takes care of the problem.
okay,
Sometimes there is no one.
okay.
And sometimes the why doesn't take care of the problem.
Sometimes the why makes it worse.
Right, and,
Because as you begin to explore the reasons that people do bad things to you, that's not always a healing experience. I'm being a little sarcastic there. That can be a very painful experience to review that. And I'm not saying that's something that we shouldn't do. I think that's the work of forgiveness. That's the work that we must continue to do. Any other thoughts about that?
You've got to deal with it. I mean, you can't be an ostrich and put your head in the sand.
Okay.
It's liable to come back and fester within you. You don't realize it cause anxiety and cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
That you may not understand.
Yeah.
Because you didn't deal with it.
Yeah. Randall, you were about to say something, and then you stopped. Okay, you took a big deep breath and like you were getting ready to talk. Okay. Anybody else?
I think over time,
Yeah.
it doesn't always, but it can, if it's significant enough, can get worse. Kind of think about like if you leave leftovers in the car, especially from like Fish City or something, on a hot summer day, you get in the car later. I've got some hurts like that in my life where if I'm not, back to Deb's point, deliberate about it, it can worsen.
Yeah. I think that's the operative word. Conscious, deliberate. It's something, it just doesn't happen on its own. And like you said, Jerry, if you leave it alone, I mean, and hope that it goes away, you just say, well, time heals all wounds. Not always. Not always. Sometimes they fester. Those wounds fester with time. So over time, this just doesn't happen automatically. Here's something that I want you to consider for a moment. Forgiveness is a decision, a conscious, deliberate decision. Okay, forgiveness is a decision motivated by the Holy Spirit and assisted by the Spirit. So it is a move that you make, enlivened, you are empowered with divine power to do this. You're not doing this on your own. Okay, this is not, as I've said in the class before, this is not just do-it-yourself techniques for forgiveness. You must have the help of God and His Spirit in this matter. In the big hurts, it requires more than just mental gymnastics. That's not enough. Now, the biblical evidence for the effort that we make is that, forgiveness is a command, right? Right. Forgiveness is a command. And here's 1 John 5:3 telling us His commands are not burdensome. And I like the CEV, the Contemporary English Version. It says, and they are not hard to follow. Well, I might take issue with some of the translation here, not with the scripture, but with the translation. But do you get the idea that John was not excusing us from any command, of God? He told us that that we needed to be doing this. And remember that forgiveness is not automatic. It requires the work of the Holy Spirit in your life. The Lord's Prayer commands forgiveness. Jesus said, forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. Note the word debt. It's a debt. Sin is a debt. Sin is a debt that you incur against God that Jesus has paid for all time. And as long as you remain in Him, that debt is paid. But that's a debt that's being paid off all the time. Okay? It has to be, or we have no hope. Okay? And there's just one string attached, that we extend the same grace that God extends to us. And I don't read of any exceptions to the rule, because the Lord commanded it, and that interpersonal forgiveness is required for our own personal forgiveness. We can't really be participating in the grace of God at all, according to Jesus, if we're not willing to be a conduit of grace and mercy to other people. Because God has opened up heaven's grace and mercy to us, therefore we must do the same. And that's the Holy Spirit will enable you to do that. Okay? All right, true or false? If I have forgiven, I will never have feelings of hatred or anger against those who hurt me. I could ask and then add the words ever again. False. I think I hear the voices of experience here. Okay. When you have been, I'm going to refer to my notes here. Because I want to word this in just the right way. When we've been hurt deeply, we may actually harbor feelings of hatred for the person. Hatred is not the opposite of love, though. Now, follow me. Hatred is not the opposite of love. Indifference is the opposite of love. Okay? It's just not caring. If someone wrongs you, was it Kyle Heffley who said this? Somebody comes to him and has a criticism of him. Kyle says, if it's not someone I'm looking for that I would go to for advice, I just don't listen to them. They can criticize all they want. It doesn't touch him. Okay? He's almost indifferent to some sources of criticism that may come to him, okay, that might require forgiveness. Doesn't for him because there are some people he listens to seriously to speak to certain things. I'm not talking about interpersonal wrongs, but if you are criticizing him in some matter of the law, well, he's a lawyer and has been for many years. I mean, you can criticize all you want, but if he's not going to come to you for advice about the law, he's probably not going to listen till you talk about the law. Okay, you're not going to really touch him. He's indifferent. Okay. I'm not saying Kyle's wrong to do that. I'm just saying that's an example of a kind of a holy indifference. And we all do that to some extent. I think pleasers, people who are interested in pleasing others, are especially vulnerable to hurt. Those of us who want to please other people, we're especially vulnerable because it doesn't matter where the criticism comes from. It doesn't matter where the hurt comes from. We're sensitive to it. We want to be accepted by everyone. And that's just not possible. So we open ourselves up to more and more damage to our own psyche, to our own spirit. Our soul hurts. But it's hard to hate without caring about the person who you hate. Now think about that for a minute. Okay? Hatred means that you have woven into your experience of hurt feelings of some kind. You're invested in that. When you have hatred or you are deeply hurt and you hate that person, you're angry with that person. You have woven a bunch of stuff, emotional stuff, in with that. So that now it's not just about the event, it's about the pain of the event. Okay? And the wound matters because that person and that relationship that you have with that person, if it's good or bad, either way, if you're a pleaser, it's really tough because then you care about it in a way that maybe some people don't, but you care about it. So there's emotion interwoven in these people and the events that cause the pain. Now, if grief is the emotional experience of losing someone or something we care about, that's grief. Anger is the emotional experience of betrayal or offense. It's natural. Okay? So how we respond to a loss is grief. How we respond to an offense is hurt and anger. It's emotional. We're invested. So the important thing to remember is that we don't stay in the anger, and going to this passage, which we mentioned a moment ago, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Sounds like Paul's saying, if you stay angry overnight, you're giving the devil a foothold. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Paul's counsel is don't go to bed angry about anything. That could mean that every night before you go to bed, you release the wrongs done to you in that day and in the days preceding. And so you say, well, I can remember so-and-so did this, and I've heard about this for 10 years. You go to bed, but release the anger before you go to sleep. Don't be mad about it. Just say, God, take it. Take it from me tonight, because I want to forgive. I can assure you, God will help you forgive if you ask Him for the assistance. He will help you. And you'll sleep better. Oh boy, will you ever. Yeah. Feelings of anger and hatred may pop up at the most unexpected times too. You may have a situation that's analogous or similar to a situation that was very painful for you. And so you head into that situation and all kinds of shadow grief, we call it shadow grief. Shadow grief just comes up. All that stuff that's been overshadowing you that you don't acknowledge every day, but it's always back there. And then you have that experience, and suddenly you're feeling all that. You get that visceral gut tightening, the anger happens all over again, and you have to give it up again. I think I've quoted C.S. Lewis in here so many times, but C.S. Lewis once said that when Jesus said to forgive 70 times 7, he may have been talking about one sin that just needed forgiveness over and over and over and over. Okay?
Paul,
Yes.
it's not only your psyche that you need, that helps, but it also helps you not to have ulcers and high blood pressure
Yeah.
and physical.
Yes. Yes. That's a side blessing to the big blessing, which is we get to participate in the grace of God for our own lives because we're in the business of forgiving others. That's what we're in the business of doing. That is our business.
Hate doesn't hurt the one you're hating, it only hurts you.
Yes. What is it? Some notable person said that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other guy to die. So, okay, let's move on. If I forgive, I am in some way saying that what happened to me does not matter. You think it's false?
It means you're better than you would be if you couldn't.
There's no longer matters.
What?
I would reword that before I agree to it.
Okay, what would you say?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Okay. It matters, but if you forgive, it's just saying that even though it hurt and it does matter, that you're big enough, by the grace of God, you're gonna move on. Does that make sense?
I get you. I follow you. In that sense, I would say it's true. In that sense.
Just tell the person.
But if you add that in there, yeah.
Tell them you've heard my experience, why did you do that? Why?
Once I have totally forgiven, then it no longer matters.
But I
it still may come up, and I may still remember it occasionally,
Mhm.
but it no longer matters.
Okay. 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 It almost sounds like you get to a point in your own experience where you can actually say, I'm done with that.
Right.
Okay.
It's got to the point that it
Okay.
don't matter anymore.
Okay.
In a way, it's stopping the person from hurting you more. If you let it go, you're kind of stopping the growth, the cancer in a way.
Ah, yeah.
It's
yeah.
not letting them hurt you more.
That grudge is really corrosive and cancerous, isn't it? It's like a tumor. Eats on your soul. It really does. That analogy is powerful. Grudges are like that. Yeah. Any other comments about that? Yeah, Jerry.
If somebody slanders you,
Mhm.
makes you look bad, does that matter or not?
Great question. I put that one out to the class. If someone slanders you, does that matter?
I think you should go to them and ask them why and tell them, do you really believe that? If you think that
Okay.
they slandered you
Okay.
out there,
Okay. But does it matter?
I think it
It's not a trick question. It's not a trick question, although some might perceive it. I can see someone saying, well, in the ultimate sense, it doesn't. But we're not talking about the ultimate sense here. We're talking about, does it matter? Does it matter to you?
don't want to be.
Well, I hope it does.
It'd be hard to get over it.
we're children of the king.
Psalm 109, remember a couple of weeks ago. I am surrounded by people who slander me, tell lies about me, and I hope they go to. I'm paraphrasing, but that's David in Psalm 109. May his days be few and another take his place of leadership. That was David in Psalm 109 before Peter said that on Pentecost. Yep, and his wife a widow and his children orphans. He goes on that way. May they be cut off from the memory of the family. I mean, he unloads the whole load. Slander matters. It mattered to David. It mattered enough to write it down. And that's not the only place where David cries out to God about slander against him. Yeah.
He was Mount Vesuvius erupting.
David's an interesting character. He's a very interesting character because he's so vulnerable. You know, you'd think a guy who was a mighty king of Israel would be just invulnerable. He'd just be, bulletproof. Oh, he was not bulletproof. He was so vulnerable all the time. When Saul's dynasty, his predecessor, was falling apart and gradually being eliminated, David wanted to be merciful to any member of Saul's family that was still living. And he found this crippled boy who was his grandson. Yeah. And he takes care of him. He takes care of him, and then that guy turns into a jerk. Tries to overthrow David's dynasty. Okay.
David loved Jonathan. It said
He did.
the love of women.
Yes.
He really loved Jonathan out of brothers.
But I was struck by the fallout. Can you tell? I've been reading this in my daily readings as the story of David and Saul, and I've just emerged from that. But the fallout of the fall of Saul's dynasty was messy. It was a mess. Saul's family and all the tribes of Israel, it gives you a hint already, the northern tribes were following Saul. It took several years for David to unite the kingdom. The kingdom was badly divided, okay? So Saul had the northern 10 kings, and all his family wanted their own king for a long time and had one, okay? Well, David had all these problems. So anyway, here's this guy named Shimei, and David shows up with his hundreds of troops, well-armed men, and Shimei is a friend or a family member, I forgot which, of Saul. And Shimei is so mad at David for David's presumed assumption of the throne. And he called him every name in the book and threw stones at him, just threw rocks at him. And David is here with his army, okay? His army's here. David's walking along and Shimei is cursing him and throwing rocks at David. And Joab, David's commander, says, I'll tell you what, I'll cut his head off. Just say the word. You know what David said? He said, I deserve this. I deserve this. What? I mean, talk about vulnerable? Talk about vulnerable.
Well, he loved hard. If you love
He did.
then you
If,
really,
yeah,
really
yeah,
to hate him.
yeah. David is just such a human guy. And you see him, when you read the Psalms, his humanity is everywhere in the Psalms that he wrote. And the struggle he had to forgive is right out there. David's the kind of guy that wears his feelings out on his sleeve. You know, and you can just read him. David would not play a good game of poker, because I mean he just let everything. He was ready to shout and dance before the Ark of the Covenant. You know, he was always out there with his emotions, but he hurt deeply. He felt deeply, and slander mattered to him, and he wrote about it in the Psalms. In the Inspired Songbook, we've got songs that say, people have surrounded me and are telling lies about me. Doo-dah, doo-dah, you know. But that's the way that way those songs are. Sing the refrain. They're killing me here. They're killing me. So anyway, it does matter. It does matter. What happens to you does matter. And this is really very important if we're going to learn to forgive well. Forgiveness does not condone evil. Forgiveness does not condone evil. God does not excuse sin. He forgives sin. He does not excuse sin. He forgives sin. God does not make light of the sins that are done against us, nor does he make light of the sins done against him. They matter. They matter. His Son died for wrongs committed against God. And every sin is a debt that we owe Jesus, that he pays. So when we forgive, it matters. But you must remember, you need to die to yourself. That forgiveness at its heart is dying to yourself. And it's not easy, of course. Look at what Paul said in Romans 12. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what's right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. This is a great admonition. It should be posted up on the lobby of our church and put up here, because this is how churches get along. This is how we get along. We don't walk on eggshells around each other. We have an atmosphere when anything comes up about which we disagree, that we're not walking on eggshells and tiptoeing around our controversies, but that we have an atmosphere of love and acceptance and patience. And he says, hey, just first of all, don't repay evil for evil. Don't pay back, okay? And do what's right in the sight of everybody, okay? Do those things that are clearly right. Do right. And he says, and live at peace. As far as it depends on you, and it doesn't all depend on you, but as far as it depends on you, be at peace with others. And he said, don't take revenge. Don't take justice into your own hands, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Let God handle the big stuff. The stuff for which you'd like to get revenge, let God handle that. For it is written, it's mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. You got to see the larger picture here. Do right by people. Don't return evil for evil. Do right to those who do bad to you, because God will take care of that in time. May not happen as quickly as you'd like it. You might not even live to see it all happen, but it will happen. God will take care of it. Okay? And do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That is a way to keep churches together. Man, if we practice these 5 verses, wow, what a church, and it's great. We do pretty well at this. We're not perfect at it, but we do pretty well at this with this here. We need to keep working on it for sure. I wanted to touch on something else here. Justice is God's business. Revenge is God's business also. Forgiveness is the act of releasing something that mattered to you, that hurt you, that you're releasing that. You're not excusing it. You are not condoning it. You are not suppressing or repressing it into your subconscious mind so that you don't think about it. I just try not to think about that. No, that's not forgiveness either. That's going to become a mental illness, folks. That's not forgiveness. When you suppress stuff like this, repress it into your conscious mind, anger doesn't go away. Anger finds weak points in your character to leak out of. And it generally leaks out with the people you're most comfortable with, the people you love the best. The anger just, it comes out of you, okay? So be careful that you're releasing it. Yes?
Follow up on that, I was trying to write that down. You said forgiveness is the act of releasing something that mattered to you, that hurt you, without suppressing it, excusing it. What else did you say?
Condoning it?
Condoning it.
Yes, without condoning it. And it's entrusting God to enact whatever justice he needs to do. Leave that to him. Somebody wrongs you, leave it to God. Say, well, that's hard. I want to do something. Well, I know. That's a hard one. But in the long run, it's far easier. I have an advantage. I get a chance to just mull this stuff over, okay? I get to mull over this for a long period of time. I'm thinking about wrongs that have been long ago done to me, okay? As I'm going through this, I'm almost, it's like inventorying the really bad wrongs that have happened in my life and how that has affected my character negatively, how repressing it, trying to be something, not to be real, that I'm not being real with my forgiveness issues, that I'm not working. Hey, listen, we need to be working on forgiveness issues continuously. It's not something that you stop doing when you reach to a certain age. There are new things that you need to forgive. But I was doing this and thinking about the wrongs that had been done, and I thought, I don't know. I didn't know at the time how to deal with it. I really didn't. And I'm not sure a class even like this would have helped all that much because my emotions were so, when you're hurt in that moment, you forget about a Bible. You forget about a Bible class. Okay? You forget about this one. You're going to be going on your gut. You're going to be mad and you're going to cry and you're going to rage and you're going to feel every emotion in the rainbow that you can feel in that moment. But when the dust settles in the long run, forgiveness is really the only path. It's the only path. Because I can't claim to be a child of God who has been forgiven and not give it. It's just not possible. I would be a liar. We would all be liars if we said, well, we've received God's good grace and mercy, but then we hold a grudge against somebody. And it doesn't matter what it is. So it's been interesting and hard, too, to inventory all those things. The sins, the acts done against us are inexcusable. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to be vulnerable with you about a time I hurt someone's feelings very deeply. And to this day, I know why I did it, and it's complicated, but I'm just going to tell you what I did. We had a nurse who had just come into hospice. This has been some years ago. Had a nurse come into hospice. I still feel bad about this. She came into hospice, and I felt like she was not paying attention to the spiritual needs of one of our patients. I didn't think she was paying attention. And even though I was talking to her about it, I just felt like, just looking at her, I could see nothing was connecting. And this was happening in a staff meeting. We have weekly team meetings, and so I was passionately putting forth my case, and she just wasn't tuned in. I didn't think she was. So after the meeting is over, I go to the bathroom, and I'm using the restroom, and I've got a buddy standing right next to me, and I'm griping about that nurse in the bathroom, thinking it's private. There's a vent in that building that goes directly into the ladies' bathroom, and the nurse heard every word I said. Every word. And I was not kind. I was not kind. I was very animated. I got called on the carpet within 15 minutes by the management. They said, "What you have done is wrong." And I said, "I was wrong. I did not control my tongue. I was wrong." I went immediately to her and apologized. And I told her, I said, "I have absolutely no explanation or excuse for what I've done to you, and I'm so sorry. And I beg your forgiveness." And she said, "I accept your apology." Boy, did I deserve that. Boy, did I deserved that. I did. You know, I worked with her for several years, and we finally, I felt after a year or two, it's how long it took for there to be a regular relationship with her. And we worked together a lot. We worked very well together. In the long run, I felt like in that moment of apology to her, that we were actually a little closer because we'd shared that. That she had forgiven me. You know, that I had been wrong.
But it took her a while, didn't it?
It took her a while.
There you go. Right.
It took her a while. It did. It did. Because what happened was my insecurity, now here's the deeper issue. My insecurities about being heard collided with her insecurities of her nursing ability. I found that out later. It took a few years to figure that out. That as talented a nurse as she was, she has self-doubt just like we all do. And so when I said that, I just gored a hole in her self-confidence, you know, or lack thereof, because she didn't really have as much confidence as I thought she did. I found out that later on that her confidence really was more about acting confident than she actually was confident. And so I hurt her by doing that. So I realized I felt guilty about it, and still feel not guilty, but I feel bad that it happened, you know, that my humanity touched hers in such a negative way. So, but anyway, be careful. What is it? Be careful, little mouth, what you say. So anyway, but it does take time. It does. And it mattered to her. It mattered to her. So we can't say these things don't matter, either in the short run or the long run. Let me close with these things. C.S. Lewis wrote in this book, The Weight of Glory, such great insight. Christian philosopher, British, Clive Staples Lewis. To be Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. This is hard. It's perhaps not so hard to forgive a single great injury, but to forgive the incessant provocations of daily life, to keep on forgiving the bossy mother-in-law, the bullying husband, the nagging wife, the selfish daughter, the deceitful son. How can we do it? Only, I think, by remembering where we stand, by meaning our words when we say in our prayers each night, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. We are offered forgiveness on no other terms. Such a simple statement, just, man, huge statement of truth. To refuse it is to refuse God's mercy for ourselves. There's no hint of exceptions. And God means what He says. Powerful stuff. Here's one more thing. David Stoop, I've been using a lot of his material from Forgiving What You'll Never Forget. He died a few years ago, sorry to say, but David wrote this in his book. Forgiving other people does not in any way benefit or let them off the hook. Stop. I'll stop right there. Full stop. You're not letting people off the hook for what they've done. They still bear the responsibility. They bear the responsibility because that is a responsibility they hold before God, not before. They've hurt you and they have some responsibility to you, but they hold that responsibility to God. He said, it allows us to cancel the debt they owe us, which in all probability they can never pay anyway. We are the ones who are freed from the expectation of restitution for the wrongs done to us. Think back over the years. If somebody came to you for a wrong that was done 30 years ago to you and said, I'd like to make it up to you, what would you say? Most of the wrongs done to us, the deep wrongs, are some things that can't be repaid. I mean, what do you want them to do? Crawl on broken glass and bleed for you? I mean, what do we want? Most of those things, they can't pay us back. They can't undo the wrong. The only thing that can be done is for us to release it and us to go on with our lives.
A lot of this, though, is not necessarily for the person you're trying to forgive, but for yourself.
Yes, yeah. It's a blessing you give yourself. It's a freedom.
Remember the guy that you drove all over Lawrence County one time and was apologizing
Yes,
to boys he was a little boy with?
yes. Yep.
And a lot of them didn't even remember the incident.
I know. I've told the story here, but it was a gentleman in his 70s who was suffering tremendous pain. And I was just a young minister. I didn't know what was going on. I was younger than Jared at the time, and his wife was in full panic mode. He was in terrible pain and telling people, I've got to go. And his wife called me up and said, my husband's gone crazy. He wants to go places. I said, well, what for? She said, I can't make it out. So I said, well, I'll be over. I went over. I sat down with him. And he told me he needed to make some apologies before he died. I said, I get it. Let's go. So we loaded him up. And I took him around to all these different homes. Spent the whole morning driving to different homes. He apologized, broke down and cried at every single home. I got to stand with him, and it was funny. There were a few of them that said, I don't know why you're doing this, Edgar. His name was Edgar. He said, I don't know why you're doing this. He said, I feel bad about this. I did you wrong. I'm sorry. These people, a lot of them had forgotten. A lot of people didn't hold it against him anymore. They'd forgiven him long years ago, but he needed to say it. He needed to apologize. So, yeah, it was a powerful morning. I never forgot it. I never forgot his name. I've forgotten many thousands of names in my life, but I have not forgotten his name.
I remember Grandma, she said, you better get over here. He's trying to take the truck out.
Yeah, he was wanting to drive himself. He was not a well man. As it turns out, after that happened, he got better. And guess what? He lived his commitment to Christ for the rest of his life. He became a leader in his church. Not immediately, but he just stayed with it. And he became a leader in that little country church in Northeast Arkansas. And I'll tell you something else. But remember, when God forgives, he does not excuse. He forgives. Sinning, because God forgives, does not mean that sinning is okay, right? When somebody wrongs you, the wrong is not okay. God's not saying it's not, you're supposed to ignore that it's not okay. No. God admits that it's not okay, and there's no condoning it, any more than our sinning is condoned before God. Being forgiven by God does not mean that you go back out and sin freely because sin is somehow okay. And Paul addresses that, I think, in the first couple of verses of Romans 6, where he says, should we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. It's not right for anybody to treat you badly and to keep on doing that because you have forgiven them. That's not right either. I would suggest parenthetically here that if someone's hurting you like that and continues to hurt you like that, you need to remove yourself from the situation as soon as possible. You can forgive them and get out. And it's okay, they're not contradictory. But our forgiving another person does not mean we condone the wrong that they do. We release it. We forgive. Because that's how God does. Okay? Any other comments or questions about this? I want to tell you, go out and practice it, but it's not easy. Because when the thing happens, you're likely to forget everything you learned in here. Because your emotions take over then. So when the dust settles, you can think about the class. Think about what we've learned here today. Think about how God forgives you. And we'll be addressing that in future classes. So remember, no class next week. Okay? I'm taking the week off. No Wednesday night class next week. But we are having community lunch next week. So we will have community lunch tomorrow and a week from tomorrow. But no classes, no ladies class either on Tuesday morning. Okay? We done. Thank you.